The Holy Gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ according to Matthew.
Glory to you, Lord Christ.
Jesus left that place and went away to the district of Tyre and Sidon. Just then, the Canaanite woman from that region came out and started shouting, "Have mercy on me, Lord, Son of David. My daughter is tormented by a demon." But he did not answer her at all. And his disciples came and urged him, saying, "Send her away, for she keeps shouting after us." He answered, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." But she came, and she knelt before him, saying, "Lord, help me." He answered, "It is not fair to take the children's food and throw it to dogs." She said, "Yes, Lord, yet even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table." Then Jesus answered her, "Woman, great is your faith. Let it be done for you as you wish." And her daughter was healed instantly. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Christ. If it was our practice to place titles on sermons, there would be two possibilities this morning. The first would be, "Nevertheless, she persisted." That's a phrase many of us have heard often in recent weeks and months. It appears on bumper stickers, memes, and T-shirts, describing in 3 concise words the courageous acts of more than one woman who has stood firm and spoken out against injustice in these turbulent times. The other possibility, being woke. Now that's grammatically awkward, but its very clumsiness jolts our awareness that things are not right. They are not as they should be when intolerance and inequity are rampant, and when contempt for the other is the order of the day. Being woke signifies a sudden insight, an opening of the eyes to understand in a new way. If you're like me, you might sometimes wonder how an ancient story can translate to a time and a place that's so very different from its origin. How can it have a word for us centuries and centuries later? Yet either of these contemporary titles could easily describe this story about a foreign woman who asks for what she wants and does not allow herself to be dismissed, and about how her persistence shakes a man out of his preconceived notions of his place and his purpose. Rather timely, don't you think? Yes, the woman is an outsider. She's not one of the chosen people. And she is a she. A mother, a desperate mother who is audacious enough to approach this man, a Jew, who has been performing miracles. Perhaps he has a miracle for her daughter. She's smart about it. She approaches him with Lord, Son of David, a title certainly not used among her own people. Jesus surprises, well, Jesus shocks us. He does not treat her kindly. He does not do what we've seen him do before, reach out to outcasts and outsiders, those despised, diseased, or possessed. In fact, his first response is none at all. He just seems to ignore her and is silent. It's interesting that the writer of Matthew's gospel calls the woman a Canaanite. Canaanites no longer existed in Jesus' time. This was a blast from the past, dating all the way back to the Exodus and the entry of Joshua and the Israelites into the Promised Land. And we remember how that went, don't we? The Canaanites who already lived in that promised land were displaced. So calling her a Canaanite not only emphasizes her otherness, her outsider status in that moment, but it evokes that ancient enmity. Well, the disciples enter the scene and they try to get Jesus to send the woman away. When Jesus finally speaks, he says, "I can't help you. I was sent to the lost sheep of Israel, not to people like you." People like you. If that isn't dismissive, a slap in the face, of course that's not in our text. That was my interpretation. But that's how it felt as I read it. And it's especially surprising because Jesus says this when he is the visitor. He has crossed over into Gentile country to Tyre and Sidon in present-day Lebanon. When the woman doesn't take no for an answer and in fact throws herself at his feet in a worshipful posture, it gets even worse. Jesus says one of the cruelest things imaginable. He essentially calls her a dog. Says it wouldn't be fair to give her what rightfully belongs to his people. We know, I suspect, what it would mean to call someone a dog today, and it wasn't any better in Jesus' time. It was and is a nasty insult. And yet, she persists. She doesn't argue or stomp off. She doesn't give up. Still on her knees, she says, "Yes, I guess I am a dog in your mind, a woman, a Gentile, unclean to you, but that doesn't mean there's nothing for me. Even the dogs get the crumbs that nobody else wants." This unlikely person claims her otherness even while challenging him. She calls into question the suggestion that God's love is only for a particular chosen group. And in that moment, Jesus is woke. This Gentile woman changed him, shook him out of his narrow focus, and opened up his ministry. He was there for all people, all lost sheep, not just the Jews. Jesus names her great faith as he heals her daughter. He does not name her persistence. And the disciples are annoyed by her. She is loud and insistent, not meek and groveling. We prefer that those who are asking for something be polite and humble too, don't we? Whether it's a street person seeking assistance or the marchers or protesters demanding justice. The world we live in is anything but polite these days, and we might want to just retreat into our cozy shells. But that time is past. Though we don't want to respond in kind with hatred and demeaning actions and language, it is time to stand up and speak out on behalf of all who are oppressed. This is not the world that God dreamed of for creation, and our faith is not merely passive acceptance. It is time to name things for what they are, not to avoid ruffling feathers, not to mouth vague generalizations. White supremacy, the idea that there is one superior race, is wrong, no matter what. And tragically, it is rooted in our own traditions. Our churches have been complicit, maintaining the cultural, racial, and gender barriers. Bad theology has contributed to this infection of our society. None of this is new. Racism, anti-Semitism, classism have been simmering for a long, long time. It's just that the current climate has given new permission to act it out in monstrous ways. Maybe, just maybe, That will finally provide the momentum for all of us to be woke, to persist in doing our part to make God's shalom a reality. Now, I certainly don't mean to suggest that everyone needs to hop on a bus to Washington for the next march, but every one of us can educate ourselves. It is not rewriting history to learn how other people have experienced events. Oh, there's a multitude of books and films, but even beyond books and films, there is the idea of becoming acquainted with people who have a different experience, listening to their experience, understanding things through their eyes and through their hearts. For the Canaanite woman, the idea of asking for justice was not an abstraction. It was a reality. It was a desperate reality in her own life. And if we can seek out those for whom those realities are as desperate, we will learn. And we will widen our own horizons and perhaps come to a better understanding and a better sense of God's kingdom for us. Now, during this Pentecost season, there is always a choice of two lessons from the Hebrew Scriptures. And I tend to go with one track all the way through, which meant that I had to leave out one today that I think is very pertinent to this. I'm just going to give you a little segment of it, because I think it provides a glimpse of that dream that God has for humanity. It's an oracle given to the prophet Isaiah, where God speaks of those who are left out or despised. Thus says the Lord, to the eunuchs who keep my Sabbath, who choose the things that please me and hold fast my covenant, I will give them an everlasting name that shall not be cut off. And the foreigners who join themselves to the Lord, to minister to him, to love the name of the Lord, and to be his servants, all who keep the Sabbath and do not profane it, and hold fast my covenant, all these I will bring to my holy mountain and make them joyful in my house of prayer. For my house shall be called a house of prayer for all peoples. Thus says the Lord God, who gathers the outcasts of Israel. Thanks be to God. Amen.